Joining us today for our Football Collective panel session. I'm joined by people who are an inspiration to me in the game. We've got Kelsey Byrne, Frankie Hunter, Nat Henderson and Lydia Bedford. What we're going to look to discuss today are our experiences of the game and a bit of our coach education and development journey. And I'd just like to start us off really with the girls kind of introducing themselves to you. So over to you. We will start with Kelsey.
Hi, my name's Kelsey. I'm the National Coach Developer for the North, West and West Midlands, currently working for the Football Association. My role now is to support females within the game, within coach education and coach development. I've been in and around the game probably within the women's and girls game for around 13 years with a mixture of roles between RTC, under 13s to development squads to first team, with a small stint at a male academy side as well.
Thank you very much. Franks?
Yeah. Hi guys, my name's Frankie. So I am currently working at Middlesbrough Football Club. I'm working as a fitness coach, so a slightly different role to some of the other guests on the panel. My role is to basically oversee the fitness and the health and well-being of all the first team players at Middlesbrough. And I've worked in the girls game in the coaching capacity, and I've worked in the boys game in the coaching capacity. But for the past sort of 6 to 7 years, I've been more into the sort of sports science, fitness side of it. So hopefully I can share a little bit of insight into what it's kind of like within the men's game with that role, but then also lean on some of my experiences in my early career as a football coach.
Thanks, Frankie. If just before Nat starts, if we just make sure our microphones are on mute, please. Yeah, Nat, over to you.
Yeah, thanks. I'm Natalie Henderson. I work at Newcastle United as the lead phase youth development coach, particularly oversee the under 13 and under 14 age groups. And then in addition to that, I am assistant coach of the England women under 16s. Previously, before my time, so I've been at Newcastle United now I'm into my 6th season full time there. And previous to that, I headed up a women's football academy at a college. And also was a past player with a very bad injury record for Newcastle United women and for Durham. And that's me.
Thank you very much. And Lids.
Hi, I'm Lydia Bedford. I currently work for the FA as England Women's Under 17s head coach. I work in the youth development phase, so I follow a 3-year cycle with players from 15s through to 17s. I've been at the FA for 6 years, started out initially as a technical talent coach overseeing the East of England. And previous to my time at the FA, I was a PE teacher full-time in secondary school. Alongside that, combined lots of roles in coaching across Centre of Excellence and women's senior game. Yeah, that's me.
Thank you very much for that and getting us started. I hope that everyone who's joining us at the minute can instantly connect with the expertise and knowledge that you guys have all got. We've got a real breadth of experience, and I think that's really going to make today's panel session special. And just before we kind of start, I kind of want to add in a bit of a disclaimer, just to say that, whilst today we're hoping for an honest and open conversation as part of the session, we do have to appreciate that all of the panelists that have joined us today are currently in a professional role and have had various roles at different organisations. And we need to appreciate that their views might not be the respective views of their organisation. So today's session, what we're looking to discuss is coach education and our coaching experiences in context. We're going to talk about and illuminate some challenges, identify some positives and real areas of strength, of support at the moment. We'll look back and take a bit of a look at what we, in our opinion, how far we've come and what we've looked to change in the last few years in this space. But most importantly for me, it was about getting together 4 role models 4 people who, in my opinion, have all had a lot of success in the game, and it's about creating a space where we can access and talk to them about their experiences and hopefully play a small part in moving the game forward. So, Kelsey, please jump in if I don't get these stats correct this next bit, all right? Because I really want to do this bit justice, all right? Let's kick off then with, in 2017, the FA launched the game plan for growth strategy, which has begun to look at women's football from 2017, and it's been reviewed in 2020. It pledged to increase the number of women's coaches, and I just want to take us through some really impressive stats and outcomes. So we've got 5,180 new female coaches in the game, an 18% increase in female coaches, which is now 34,581. We've got 2,487 female grassroots and talent pathway coaches that are accessing support. We've given away 204 female bursaries at UEFA B, A licence and pro licence, and we've seen a 333% increase in females occupying senior coaching roles in the Women's Super League, Championship and kind of Tier 3. We've gone from 41 UEFA A licence holders in 2017 to 82 now in 2020. And in part, what we've decided and agreed to do today is take a bit of a look behind some of those numbers. So what I'd like to start off with is asking and talking to you guys, in your opinion, how do you think coach education and the game has changed over the last few years for women? Let's start with you, Kels.
Yeah, no worries. Just listening to you say them stats actually is incredible, and what gets me out of bed in the morning. That's why I love what I do. And we're literally just starting the next 4-year cycle where the women's game and the female game and female coaches is definitely at the forefront of what the FA are doing moving forward. So I think in terms of the coach education and how it's changed and evolved, that it's almost become normalised that the women's game and female coaches are represented across all of the education pathway, whether that's level 1 through to level 5. We see more female coach educators, more coach educators that have been involved in the female game and can bring context and contextualise some of the information that's been given on course. And especially in my experiences now of the A licence, that we're starting now to have lots of game footage data that's available from the WSL, from the Women's Championship, that's discussed on course. Whether you're part of the male game or female game, you get access to that footage and get to unpick it as a game and not just the female game. It's about exploring the game in its entirety. We're starting to explore bringing female players in to actually be on the course and be dummy players on the course, that not only brings some context to the female coaches and the coaches that represent the female game on course, but also gives a little bit of a showcase to the male game as well, around how the game's developing and the players just being there and being able to showcase what they're about and what they can do. It has been fantastic. And probably one experience in particular for me was a girl was going through a rear licence at the time at a championship club and offered to bring her players in. And one of the first team coaches, Tuesday within the first team at the Lionesses senior squad, came and delivered a workshop on the World Cup. He delivered an on-field grass-based session with the girls, and Phil was in and around, so Phil came to say hi. Bev was on a pro licence, she came to say hi, and the day was just incredible. That if you were part of the female game on that day, just having female players, representation from the senior Lionesses, coaching staff being in and around, asking questions. And I think we've made a huge stride forward in FA education, that's now just becoming normal, that's part of the package and part of being on the course. And for me, it probably goes beyond coach education as well, just into the coach development piece around the amazing team that Audrey Cooper's put together with the coach development team that sits across the country with 9 women's high performance centres linked to universities across the country. There's 4 of my roles and myself that sit across the country, supporting coaches within the female game, male or female, from entry level to coming to university wanting and having an aspiration to be a coach, through to sitting on the pro licence at level 5, and the support, whether that's workshops, contextualised CPD, in situ support, picking up the phone, having a coffee. There's lots of things going on where coaches are supported throughout the game. So, I mean, I've probably got on my soapbox there because this is my bread and butter and what I'm passionate about. So I'll let somebody else speak. But for me, it's just, and we've made so many strides. It's just incredible.
Yeah, I think it's points well made, and it's really interesting to hear your experiences behind those numbers and some of the ways you've managed to achieve that. So yeah, thank you very much for sharing, Kels. Did anyone else want to chip in with something at that point?
Yeah, I will. Actually, same as Kelsey, hearing those numbers at the start made me smile, because I think when I started my A licence in 2011, there was probably only around 20 female coaches that had the A licence, and Sav, we were on it at a similar time, and I remember thinking, like, what number are we going to be? I couldn't even tell you what I was now, but you know, I've always had that competitive nature, and I kind of wanted to, you know, try and get my name on that list as early as I could. So those numbers creeping up now is brilliant. And I think the other side of it is, I was on a call earlier today where we were talking about opportunities in football, particularly full-time ones. And I think, you know, I went into teaching because as a kind of 18-year-old, that was a full-time career in sport. And that was probably all I thought that would be. But actually now I think it's an exciting time in terms of the number of full-time roles that have cropped up in the game and the opportunities that are out there for people to be able to access. So I think that's really key, and it's about trying to seek out those opportunities and find, you know, the right one for you. But I was really lucky as well in terms of like coach mentoring and support from a young age. I think about 23 when I started my A licence, to be involved in the female mentoring scheme, which used to be run by Brent Hills and was a brilliant way to network with other young female coaches that were on their A licence journey or were looking to go on to that journey. And I have many, you know, friendships and relationships that have been built from that, and the support and the insight into the international environment, I'm, you know, confident is one of the reasons I sit in the role I do today, because I had attainable role models that I could look up to and I could seek out to for advice. And I think that's key. And I think that still exists in different ways. So a couple of years ago, Kelsey spoke about Audrey's team. Audrey's been pivotal in trying to put together some different events that, you know, bring coaches together. We were lucky enough to get the opportunity to go to the Euros in Holland a few years back, and they brought together coaches from across the women's game, not necessarily females, just coaches involved in the women's game, and national staff. And I'm a big advocate on relationships in football. You know, key people will be the difference in your career progression and opportunities that come. So those opportunities for kind of like more informal coach education are really important.
And just to probably add on to that, Lids, as well, around, I think now it's about trying to catch people in rather than trying to catch people out. I think people are there now to sort of support each other and really want to get into little groups and form relationships where you can support each other, and people are looking for roles, they know who to go to, and whether that's formally as part of our team or whether that's informally as just relationships within the game. I think there's a lot of small networks of females now starting to appear that everyone's supporting each other and trying to help each other grow within the game.
I think for me, Sav, when I think about the question in terms of like how's coach education progressed over the years and over time for women, I think it's progressed for everybody. Really, like when I think back to when I did my B licence years ago to then when I did my A licence, the structure of the course was different. And I think like everything, you know, we're constantly evolving and we're constantly trying to make things better. And over time, it has got better. I always remember, and I know we've had this conversation before, a lot of us on the call, in terms of it was always very normal to be one of very few females on a course. So when I did my level 1, level 2, there was always either just me in the room or maybe me and one other female and then males. And that becomes the norm. It became completely normal for me. It wasn't, if anything, if I went into a room and it was full of females, that would be really different for me. and for like everybody else really. So I think in terms of coach education, it's evolved over time, but not just for women, for everybody really, in terms of, you know, it's in a better place now than what it might have been years ago, and it's evolved. And then in addition to that, we're all used to being one of very few females, but nowadays you walk into a room in a course and there's so many more females. And like Kelsey and Lyd said, the stats are unbelievable to back that up, but it's a great feeling to see that whatever course you go in now, there's a lot more females in the room than there was certainly 5-6 years ago. So we are making huge developments to that really, and I think that's a real positive.
Yeah. I think,
just to add on to that, Nat, I think that we're up to 37 female game candidates this year across 3 courses on the A licence. So it's started to be now that when you walk in a room, you see some familiar faces, which is actually really nice.
Yeah.
Really nice.
I think if I can just from a totally different angle, I guess, when I look at, so when you talk about Sav, how the game has changed,
yeah,
I'd say probably 8 or 9 years ago I worked at a girls' centre of excellence as a coach, so I had more of my coaching hat on then. And I think something that was always spoke about within the community was how, I guess, the female game compared to the male game was a little bit slower. Physically, they probably weren't at the same level as the boys' game, which we all know, and there's different reasons for that. But I think then, if I look back a couple of years ago when I worked with Lydia at the time, within the elite game, so with the under-17 girls squad, the strides that it had made in those years in terms of the physical or the physicality of the players was massive. And I think if you look at courses now, and this works both ways, so any of the courses that you go on now, I think the amount that they upskill and educate coaches around physical work, around, you know, more the science side of the game, I think that that's helped massively. And then I think about me and in my role now, and the coaching courses that I went on years ago, like they've helped me hugely in the role that I'm in now. So I think it's, in terms of the courses, how they're looking at upskilling coaches in different areas, I think for me has improved. And I think that that is in turn helping the female game as well. And yes, of course, there's more support there than probably there was. But I think twofold is that actually coaches have got the ability now to work with those players in that space. And I think that for me, you know, that's music to my ears. You know, I saw going off on a little bit of a tangent here, but I saw a job advert a couple of years ago at a professional club for a sports science role or a fitness coach role. I can't remember the exact role that was advertised. But one of the desirables was to have a coaching experience and to have a UEFA B. So it's almost like, you know, from my point of view, we're expecting coaches to know a lot about physical development and that type of area. But actually, the other side is now people that are in my role within the professional game, how much do they know about the game and how much can they add context to what we're doing? And I think it's nice that there's almost an appreciation on both sides, that we have an understanding. But you know, you need to be able to flip between different things to be successful within that.
Yeah, and I think when I've spoken to a couple of people recently, when we're looking at coaches in these environments, they need to have more than one hat they can wear. They might specialise in science and coaching, or psychology and slightly different areas. So again, I think that's a point well made. And the variety and breadth of those experiences is fairly vast. And one of the kind of debates that exists at the minute is around kind of the trade-offs between mixed courses and mixed experiences, whether that's in situ or on courses, or perhaps some of the more targeted female initiatives, or you know, for example, it's the mentoring program we were on in Kels, that would fall into that. So I wondered if I could get some of your opinions on what do we think perhaps are some of the benefits and trade-offs of those kind of experiences of the mixed and the female only type kind of experiences in education that is on offer now.
Me to start?
Yeah, go for it, Lids.
So I think I've never experienced a formal coach education course that was female only, but you know, just putting my teacher hat on and thinking about, you know, other people I know in the game, I think as a level 1 or 2 candidate, there might be some females that really embrace that environment and find it a lot more comfortable to go into. You know, if my mum was going to go and take up a level 1 tomorrow to go and coach my niece, then for her that could be really powerful. But I'm also a strong believer that the higher you progress in your badges, for me, that shows your mentality as a coach. It shows the direction of travel that you want to go in, and it shows your aspiration levels. And ultimately, and we're all we're all visible role models of it now. To work at the top level of the game, you are going to be in some male-dominated environments, and actually the skills that you can learn from being in those mixed courses at B license, A license, pro license, and the relationships you can build and navigating your way through that type of environment can be a really key learning experience for you then to be able to be successful, to go into the game and hold your own in that type of environment. So I think I can see the value of them, but I'd really encourage people to make sure that they have variety in their journey, and it might not be all female, it might be different environments at different times, because I am a massive advocate of what we experienced on the female mentoring scheme. And that obviously went alongside my experience on the A license, where I was, one of only 2 females. But at the same time, I could access the female mentoring program alongside that, where I was one of 12 females, away for 2 days. So there was a bit of balance there in terms of my learning journey. And I think that's important because, I spoke about the relationships from the female mentoring scheme, but on every one of the courses I've been through, A license, pro license, some of the relationships and friendships I've built with the male candidates on that course are as strong and as powerful as the female ones.
I think for me, Sav, just to jump in on that, I totally agree with Lids in terms of I think we need complete variety. And I think ultimately as coaches and as people working in sport, ultimately we're working with people, whether they're male or female. And I think we have to get to grips with working with people. So for me, I'm the same really. I've never experienced a female only course. I can totally see the benefits of them. But when I put that into my full-time job now in a male-dominated environment in a boys' academy and managing staff and managing male staff, I'm not sure that would have done me any favours back then to have been bubble-wrapped of females only, because ultimately I'm working with people, female and male. So I think certainly, like what Lydia is saying there, I think you definitely need to be able to interact with people really, whether they're male or female. And there's females that'll help you in the game, there's males that'll help you in the game. But I think the top and bottom of it for me is we work with people and getting the best out of people, and how we interact with people, how we build relationships with people is what's paramount to it.
Yeah.
And I think just adding on to that really is just from a coach education perspective that, these are conversations we've had a number of times, especially with Matt Bishop, who's took the A license and grown it and done a fantastic job of moving it forward. Is that, do we group, when we do tasks, do we group the female game candidates on watching the female footage, but actually we found such a rich experience from just colliding everything together, allowing, the female game to watch Premier League footage and the lads in the boys academy coming in to watch WSL footage, and mixing groups to that. It's almost we're just studying the game and normalising that this is just the game and they're players. And the way that things might be done may be slightly different, and the way that they play might be slightly different, but it's unpicking that and unpicking the tactics and the technical elements around that. So I think there's absolutely a time that, Natalie and Lydia have both alluded to, where being in a little group of females is brilliant, and we've started to create small communities of practice. I've got one in particular in the Northwest, which has around 9 female A licence coaches on it, where we just get together and talk. We talk problems, we talk challenges, we talk environments, context, players, and that's just over a coffee, sat in a room and just chatting, and it's brilliant. And the friendships and the connections that have been made between them people are fantastic. So having that as a separate identity to the formal education and having that blend of learning experiences, I think is pivotal to anybody's learning.
And did you have anything you wanted to add, Lids?
Not that I hadn't already mentioned, no.
Frankie?
Yeah, I think just listening to everyone on the panel there, I think female-only courses are brilliant for the growth of the game, or how I would understand it, for the growth of the game and people who feel comfortable being in that environment. Excellent. To have that opportunity to do it, fantastic. But I totally agree, and what Nat was saying really resonated with me in terms of we're just people, and we're just working with people. And if we're more comfortable being on a female-only course, well, that might give us an idea of where we might want to end up, and it might just guide where you're going to end up. But I think we're working with people, you're dealing with people, and you know, I really enjoyed when I did my coaching badges. I really enjoyed being on the mixed course. I think I took a lot from that, and I think that, like Lydia said, that really set me up to work and deal with the environment that you know, at times I think if I'd have come through a female only course, I'm not sure I would have dealt and being how I was within the environment that I work in. So I think in terms of setting me up for my future career, it was brilliant to go on a mixed cohort. But then similarly, you know, if having female only courses helps the growth of the game, certainly to start with at grassroots level, then perfect. So I think having both is the best way forward. Okay,
great. And in a couple of weeks ago, Leanne, Norman and Donna DeHaan did a Leveling the Playing Field webinar. And they presented some research around an infographic that was informed through interviews with some top female coaches. And some of those core principles for shaping and evolving coach education moving forward were things like trying to normalise females in the game, thinking about educating and sponsoring female networks and communities of practice, trying to map and identify talented coaches in the game, thinking about how we can recruit females in clubs and organisations, and thinking about how we can safeguard coaches' experiences. So with that topical and really important and powerful research in mind, I just kind of wondered what your views are on perhaps how we could improve coach education or development for the next generation of female coaches coming through.
Do you want me to start on that one, Sam?
Yeah, that would be great, Kels.
I think for me, it's building on the work that's been started. I think there's been some great stuff that's been started around, you know, the clips, the data involving the female game, female players coming on board, a breadth of female educators and coach educators across level 1 to level 5. And I think building on that and continue to build on that and continuing to normalise on course and off course, you know, will be a great start to just continue that journey. And I think as a team, we're starting now to explore different ways to connect with the game and almost make it more visible for everybody. And I think we've started that journey with some of the webinars that have come out. So on Friday, the female game webinar came out, and I've recorded another one this morning. Just trying to get more people visible, getting it on the YouTube channel, putting it on there. You know, it's not segregated as, you know, this is a women's only page. It's on the FA page, it's on FA Learning, and it's about learning the game. We're starting to think about potential podcasts and other ways that we can continue to connect with coaches across the female game. And I think the continuing of the community practice, I think continuing to grow that, and maybe that's driven by us to some extent, but also driven by coaches within the game that just want to get together, connect together, and almost create that support network. And I think off the back of the stuff that we did with Brent, we've continued these little bubbles of support, and I'm hoping from my community practice that I've set up, these bubbles will continue without me, and I can almost step away and start another one, and they will just continue to work. That these coaches will create lasting friendships, that they'll continue to connect with each other and support each other. So I think continuing some of the really good stuff that's happened, and building on that even further, I think would be a great start. And you know, it is the start of the journey, and we've still got a long way to go in that, and we're still pushing and making strides every single day. And I think every day is a foot forward and a foot forward, and I think we've just got to continue the momentum of that. And the more that we can push that as a collective within the female game, we continue to bang the drum and we continue to push it forward, then the more that it's going to continue to grow.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, all the examples you gave, Sav, of things that, you know, could be put in place, you know, many parts of that are already happening, and I think the more we can do to support females, the better. But I do have a really strong personal kind of feeling around the fact that, you know, you create your own luck, and you've got to be willing to put in the hard work to, you know, to get those opportunities. And sometimes you just need a little bit of help along the way, someone who, you know, will push you in the right direction or advocate you to move into a different position or get a different opportunity. And I think that happens even within the RTC structure, the technical talent coaches that oversee like all different parts of the country, they're always looking out and supporting the coaches within that pathway. And if I think back to when I was doing that role in the East a few years ago, you know, there's 2 females that came through that pathway that have since been involved in, you know, England opportunities. So I think it's about relationship and connections. And I think as the female football family, like we're pivotal in doing that, and we all have to be open to, you know, helping each other out along the way and making ourselves accessible. And I think that's each individual. But I think what would be really important, or what continues to be important, is that for young coaches, they can see that accessibility of those role models. And I think it's growing so much. One of the things we have to be, I guess, aware of is that it doesn't become a little bit like the men's game where, you know, you're never going to get access to 5 minutes of a Premier League manager, but, you know, someone like Casey would probably give you 5 minutes of her time if you reached out to her. So I think we're in a really good point right now in the women's game. And it's really important that we keep those connections open. And I guess I just encourage everyone who's listening, you know, you never know unless you ask. You know, you want some advice, you want to reach out to somebody. It's easy to think that opportunity might not be there, but actually if you don't ask, you don't get.
Yeah. I think on that as well, for me, I think in terms of like both what Kelsey and Lydia said, I think like organisations are making massive strides in terms of like getting more female coaches. So if I even think now back to even just a few years ago, there's so many more developments, and like Kelsey said, it's a step forward every day. And obviously the FA are doing a lot in terms of increasing female coaches. And like the Premier League, so the Premier League's ECAS scheme, which I was fortunate to do. So I was already at the Boys Academy at Newcastle United, and then was fortunate enough to go through the ECAS scheme. But even that, in terms of opening the doors for female coaches and supporting them along the way to be full-time in a Premier League male academy. So I think organisations are making massive strides. And then I totally would like re-emphasise the message that Lydia says in terms of, you know, you make your own luck and you have to work pretty hard to get there, and you have to learn the skills of the trade ultimately. I always think, you know, we can be given these opportunities, but eventually if you don't know what you're talking about and you're not particularly a great coach, you will get found out down the line. So I think it's, you know, organisations are making massive steps to introduce more female coaches, but same as what Lydia said, you know, you've got to like never underestimate the amount of hard work and learning that goes into it, and how much knowledge you've got to know and learning all those skills of the trade really. And I think we all want, like, especially coaches in the sporting world, we all want to get to the next step, don't we? We all have dreams and aspirations, but just taking the time to like gather that knowledge and learn your trade, I think is really important.
I think if I could just add on to that as well, Nat, I think we could all probably allude to what we've all done in our early career to get to where we are now, and the graft that we've all put in. And I think it's right, you've got to kind of serve your apprenticeship, if you will, and put the hours in. You know, we could all talk about 12, 14, 15 hour days, whatever it is, going from one job to another. And I think we probably, you know, if you rewind 10 years ago, there was less of us within the game. So, you know, we had that drive, we had that belief that we wanted to get there, and we wanted to kind of stake our claim and be a part of the game. So I think that, you know, nowadays there is probably going to be more opportunities for females within the game because of what's gone before. And I think that people just need to have that drive and belief that they will get there. But in the same time, don't try and take out 2 or 3 steps in one. Really exhaust everything that you can whilst you're in kind of your foundation part of your career. That's something, you know, when I've thought about this and reflected, you know, we do all put graft in and we all put the hours in. But at times I think, do you know what? I think if I could have gone back, if I could go back 10 years, I probably would have stayed at a more junior role for a little bit longer. Because the more you try and push and the more you want to drive forward, of course we want to be ambitious and we want to get to higher roles. But then with that becomes less work on the field, as I'm sure we all know that, more managerial responsibilities. So don't try and rush from one stage to another when you can really exhaust learning opportunities, you know, in the infancy of your career.
Yeah. I think one of the things
can I just add to that, Sam? Sorry, I think that time on the grass as a young coach is so important. I was actually chatting to Vicky Jepson this morning about her career progression, and she did 6 years with the under 11s at Liverpool Centre of Excellence, you know, and now she's WSL head coach. Well, actually, sorry, that's a bit controversial. Sorry, Vic, she's not WSL head coach. But you know my point. You know, she did her time, and actually, I think a lot of people would have said to her along the way, you know, why don't you move up? Why don't you go and, you know, take the 13s? But actually, you know, she was brilliant at what she did, and she got a lot of hours and experience, and she was comfortable with that. And I think that's a really important message. You know, be comfortable at what you're good at, and you know, put the time in to be an expert in that area. I think, you know, it's easy, like Frankie said, to think about having half an eye on what's next. But we need brilliant coaches in YDP or youth age groups, because without that, we're not progressing players to the seniors. So I think, you know, everyone will have a niche. You'll have, you know, whether that's development, whether it's winning, whether it's foundation. I think it's just about giving time to actually developing what you're good at and not feeling the pressure just because a full-time role might come up to move to something different or higher. I don't think higher is necessarily better. Older isn't necessarily better. It's just about what your skill set is.
And just to add on to that, Liz, and what Frankie just said there around just being more purposeful in your development and adding purpose to what you're going after. So if you think about there with Vic, like Vic was doing the 11s, I was doing the 13s, we'd jump in the car, we'd fly across to the academy and do the academy, because we just wanted a breadth of experience from 11v11 performance to development. We'd fly up then to watch the first team and try and get a little bit of experience of that, because we were purposeful in what we wanted to learn and what we wanted to unpick within our journeys. And I think we're at a time now where there's so much available. There's webinar after webinar and podcast after podcast and articles, and it's almost you can overload that and just watch everything without taking nothing in. It's what are you actually wanting to take away from it? What are your real purpose and drive behind what you're watching or what you're experiencing? Or, you know, if I'm going to go watch a coach, like Lyd said, and I'm going to reach out to someone and say, can I come and watch? What are you watching for? You know, what do you want to pick up, and being really purposeful with that. And I think that's where, just adding on to the programs, what Lyd's alluded to earlier around what Audrey's program, there's a new coaching excellence initiative that Audrey's running now, which is for the pro game. So, you know, people like Vicky's on that around just supporting them in the pro game, around the professionalism of the game. You know, the professionalism has moved so quickly, and we've become this professional game overnight, if you like, that we're almost catching up with those skill sets of dealing with the media, influencing within the wider club. So you've got the male side of the club, female side of the club, etc. So I think there's so much now in place for the top end of the game through to the grassroots. It's just been really purposeful in, you know, what do you want to excel in next? Where are your skills gaps? Where do you want to search and seek next to get better?
I think sorry, I'm going to jump in on that as well. For us, like, because we can just go off on with this, can't we? But I think sometimes it's just human nature to focus so much on the destination that you miss the journey. And it's always like, what's next? And then it's not until you look back, you think, oh, I wish I'd have spent a bit longer there. I wish I'd have learned a bit more there. I think the girl, like the women on the call would agree, but I always think, like, I'm nowhere near my destination. I'm learning every single day, and I don't actually know what my destination is. And I listened to Eddie Jones, you know, on a webinar, because we've been doing a million webinars in lockdown. And he said, you know, you never become a good coach. You're always just trying to become a good coach. And I just think if the England rugby manager can have that mentality and that mindset, then that's what we should all have. Ultimately, we just want to get better and we want to keep learning. And we'll might not be sure what the destination is, but the journey is really important. And to do it with a purpose, like Kelsey said, I think that's the key really is, you know, I don't think, oh my God, we've made it to the top. We're on this panel. This is brilliant. Like, you know, we're still on our journeys too. And I think that's the key really, like never stop learning. And that would be one of the biggest bits of advice, is learn as much as you can and do it with a purpose.
I think if I can try and summarize that last bit, is what's kind of coming through is the importance of females in the game being supported in a variety of different types of initiatives, feeling valued, appreciated, given opportunities, We've had loads of really good mentoring experiences and programs that are evolving. But I kind of just made a note that it sounds like just be really good at the role that you've got, and you're likely to get noticed for being good and being credible and being knowledgeable in the game, and that might help you to progress rather than be in a rush to progress all the time. What's next, and try and be good in the moment at what your role is there. If I may, I'd like to ask you all, you four are probably, you're all successful. You've all got great CVs, education, etc. So what have been some of the biggest obstacles and challenges, and how have you tried to navigate your way through that to be kind of where you are?
We're all waiting for Kelsey to speak.
I'm in.
Come on, Kelsey, you lead us in.
Sorry, guys, I let you down there. Sorry, I was trying to let someone else in.
Who wants to kick us off?
No, I will, because I feel like I've threw Kelsey under the bus now. I feel like I need to dig her out. Sorry, Kels. I think for me, like, this is a regular question really, in terms of like, what challenges and obstacles do you find? And for me, I don't think there's any, certainly in my point of view, there's no real big challenge or obstacle that stands out. There's probably small ones that happen all the time. And I think that's probably one of the key things really, is there's no huge challenges. You know, there's loads of challenges that myself and the women on the call would have had to overcome at some point. And I think the small challenges are ultimately what, you find out about yourself then. And I know, Frank, you mentioned this, but in terms of like being uncomfortable at times, you have to go out your comfort zone. You have to, face fear. You have to put yourself in situations where you're going to get better and you're going to find out about yourself. And I think when you do that, that helps confidence. I think bravery is the foundation of confidence. So for me, like in terms of obstacles, challenges, I couldn't give you one, but what I could say is that we probably overcome small ones every single day. And you find out about yourself and you find out about your character, and ultimately progress to be a better person and a better coach, I would hope.
I think you're right, Nat, with that. I think when I think about this question, I think that everything that springs to mind and all kind of the tangible experiences is all about when you were happy that you were content that you might fail at something. So it's that accepting a challenge, knowing that you might not succeed, but it's going to put you in a better place than where you were. So I think back to when I was on my coaching journey and doing my UEFA B, I was quite comfortable and quite content coaching the under 12s at the Centre of Excellence, the under 14s at the Centre of Excellence, went up to under 16. That was a bit of a challenge, but still felt within my comfort zone because I knew them. And then all of a sudden the centre manager said, right, tomorrow you're going to do it with the under 18 boys at Hull. And I was like, wow, okay, that's now massively outside my comfort zone. I've never met these players. They don't know who I am. The game's going to be so much quicker. But that was the whole point. He identified that for me to become a better coach, I had to get out of my comfort zone and go and deliver in a totally non-sterile environment. And I went, and it was a bit of a car crash, if I'm being honest, but it was fine, because then when I came to that problem again, or that situation again, I was better equipped for it. So I think we can probably all pull on these little experiences that we had, but we have to be comfortable to fail at times and not seeing failure as a negative. Like, not succeeding is what's going to set us up for something better in the future. And I think that once we get to grips with that and we go, right, I'm actually content that I'm not comfortable with this situation, but I'm going to attack it the best I can. And whatever I glean from it, well, brilliant. And I'll take that forward. And I think that's probably, in my journey, I've been somebody, and that was probably that one experience with the boys is where it all started. Because that was the first time where I thought, oh, okay, I'm not great here. But then reflecting on that and learning from that, I know that I need that more. So I think any time when somebody asks me to do something and I go, oh, right, okay, I know I need to do it and I just need to go for it. And whatever happens, happens, and I'll take the positives, and anything that don't go right, well, I know it's going to help me further down the line. So I think that's a really important kind of take-home message for anyone listening, is get yourself out of your comfort zone and don't be afraid of not being comfortable in that environment.
I think adding on to that, Frankie.
Everybody, but we're all excited about this
Oh,
conversation.
it's a good question.
Good question.
No, I was just going to say, I think like bravery looks different for everybody as well.
Yeah.
Like if I have a fear of lifts, then me getting in a lift is a really big thing to me. But Frankie might just get in a lift with her eyes closed, and that might be fine to her. But I might get a bit of confidence that I've faced my fear and I've done that. So I think bravery looks different for everybody. And I think it's that common sense thing that you say, isn't it? In terms of like mistakes are good, they help you learn. But actually at the time it's really uncomfortable and gives you that feeling in your tummy. Like I get it even just thinking about it. And I think one of the other things that resonated with was in terms of that uncomfortable feeling, but when you look back, it's not as bad. We kind of overcomplicate it in our head. So I know we had this conversation, Frankie, but I had to do the exact same for my A license, do a week with the under 18s. And in my head, I'm like imagining that it's just going to be, the football's going to be so different and it's going to be so quick and I'm not going to spot things. And you just escalated and you're worried and you churned up, and then actually you do it and it's just football and they're just players, and yes, it's a bit quicker. But I think you take a lot of confidence from those little steps of bravery, really. But I think bravery looks different for everybody. And I think it's important to step outside that comfort zone. Sorry, Kels.
No, I was literally just going to add on to Frankie's point, and you probably summed it up nicely there around, I try not to think of things as challenges and obstacles, but more opportunities. So it's not a challenge, it's an opportunity for me to grow or, to do something different. So I think if you almost flip that on its head and look for opportunities within the challenge. What was it going to make me better at? What can I learn from this as a result? So I think that thinking about it in that mindset for me really helps with stepping into those uncomfortable situations and thinking, what's the opportunity I'm going to get here? And what do I want to learn from it? So I remember taking one of my first A license workshops and stood on the grass, and someone said to me, what are you looking for today? What do you want to learn from it? And I was so caught up in the moment that I had to deliver, and I was trying to, and when I stood back and I thought, actually, what can I learn from this experience here? This is a great opportunity for me as a coach educator to learn. And I think once we take that step back, then, it does become an opportunity and not a challenge.
Yeah, I think if I can add as well, I think we're all going to experience like moments of uncertainty. I don't think I have any big like career defining obstacles that I've had to get through, but I'm a big advocate that, you have to take leaps of faith at different points in your career. And sometimes you're treading into uncertain waters. You don't really know what the kind of return or outcome of that's going to be. And as Frankie said, it might not be until you look back 6 years later that you realise that, actually what felt like a really big life-changing decision, is one that you've kind of moved on from by that point. So my best example really is, as I said earlier, I was full-time teaching in secondary school. I loved coaching, but I had a full-time career that was very consistent. And it was, it was a career for life if I wanted it. And I moved to work at Uxbridge College in London because I wanted the opportunity to coach with boys. They had a 16 to 19 academy, and I knew to help pass my A license, I needed regular access to boys. So I took that jump, which was a leap of faith in itself. But then I was desperate to work for England. It's been my dream forever. And one of my reasons for taking that jump was also hoping that the flexibility of an FE college would mean that I could access things that were going on from an FA perspective a little bit more easily. I'd spoken about it in my interview process, but one of my biggest obstacles in getting where I am, which I'm sure is the same for everyone on the call, was paying for my A license. I was really lucky to get support from the FA, but ultimately, it is a fair chunk of money. So every summer, I used to work for Man United soccer schools for 6 weeks outside of like the teaching break, and the money I got from that would pay basically for the courses. And that summer I was due to go to Japan with Man United soccer schools for 4 weeks. It would have been a life-changing experience. I still haven't been to Japan, so you can work out where the story goes. But about 2 weeks into my job at the college, I had Japan set up. They'd agreed it when I went. I got an email from the FA inviting me to go and be assistant coach to Lois Fiddler for an under-16s Nordic tournament in Iceland for 10 days in July. And actually the college, there's no teaching going on in college in July or August. So I was kind of hoping, you go into the director of sport and you're like, can I do this? Maybe they'll say yes to both. And the immediate response was, you need to choose one or the other. And I think I said it already, like, I wanted to work for England. It was a passion. It was, it was a real aspiration of mine. So the decision was a quick one. But actually looking back now, within 12 months of that, I took a full-time job at the FA, and I'm not sure, you know, you look back on those decisions that feel massive at the time. You think about, you know, the difference in 4 weeks of paid work in Japan versus 10 days on one camp that's not guaranteed to ever happen again. But they're the types of things that shape you and define you as a coach. And I think every one of us has got to be willing to put ourselves out of our comfort zone and take little leaps of faith along the way. And, you know, to some extent, you hope you land on your feet, but either way, you learn from it. And I think that's the most important thing.
Do you know what's quite interesting with this? Just listening to the last two questions when we're talking about obstacles and things that may get in the way, like none of us have spoke about the lack of opportunities being a female. Like, it's interesting, isn't it? Because that could be one that we could quite easily say, but it's not true for any of us. We've kind of taken that leap of faith, or we've put the groundwork in and the opportunities are there, and we're hopefully in the right, you know, because we've served our apprentices, if you like, we've taken the time to do the hours early in our career. When we've been given those opportunities, we've taken them. But it's, you know, none of us have mentioned about a lack of opportunities, which is interesting.
Yeah, that's a good observation, Frankie. And I always think that, you know, when we talk about like the term, just terminology in terms of like be a good, like she's a good female coach. Like, we don't want to be good female coaches. We just want to be good coaches. Good, and that's the top and bottom of it, really, isn't it? Like, we're just people and we're just trying to learn the best we can and do the best we can. So, but I think that's a real good observation, Frankie.
I think when I've been listening to you guys, the bravery and the risk taking is a really important element of that. And I think sometimes as women, we look at job adverts and we write ourselves off before we've even applied. And I think I'd be encouraging anyone who's listening to back yourself, to go and take the opportunities if they arise. And I think when I applied to go and work in the boys' academy, I'd almost written myself off and had built up the problems. And when I got there, they didn't exist. Do you know, I cannot think of a single session where I've worked with a boy or a boys' team and it's been any different from working with a girls' team. They've always been very respectful. They work hard. There are definitely some subtle differences between male and female teams and girls and boys and the environments, of course. But I think some of the challenges were in my own mind, not actually on the grass when I was working. And I think it's definitely, I'd be encouraging them to put themselves out there for those opportunities. Okay, so I'm mindful of time, so we'll go for one more question before we go for Q&A. So I was just wondering, for you guys, when you've been on your kind of journey, I wondered if you had a role model, someone that had kind of helped you on your way. It may be a role model, it might be an ally, someone who's been important to kind of your career and help you grow and develop.
Shall I start this one?
You can, Franks, if you
right,
want.
Jumped in, haven't I? I've had this. We had this conversation before, and it's interesting when I think about this and role models and allies. And I think that for me, I more draw upon characteristics of people as opposed to this person was my role model. So when I think about people that have influenced my career, I think about people who have had ridiculous attention to detail. Ridiculous attention to detail at the elite level. So the individual I'm thinking of was the manager of the club of my first team role. And I thought, wow, like when I saw the amount of detail that went into everything, how meticulous the planning was, I was just thinking that's because it's an elite environment and that's what elite looks like. I guess as my career has spanned out and I've worked with multiple coaches of different experiences, I've realised that was actually a really good skill set of that coach. And the detail and how everything was planned out, how he interacted, and it's a male role model. So mine's a male role model, and how he was with interacting with players and how it was different for different players. So what does that player need? And how does that look? How does it look out on the pitch when he's trying to get a message to that player compared to somebody who needs something totally different? And how he was able to flip from communicating to one player to another and it be different yet so meaningful for the players was something I'd never seen before. But I guess at the time, I just thought, well, this is just elite. This is what elite looks like. But then you go on your journey a little bit more and you see other people work and you think, no, actually, that was a really, really good part of that coach's skill set. And that's something through my career since that I've always tried to keep with me in terms of attention to detail, things you can manage, things you can control, making sure things are planned, trying to interact with players differently depending on what they need, and understanding why they may be in the environment that they're in now. People have come on different journeys. You look at like a first team environment and how different one player could be to another. You know, at the club we've got here, we've got 18-year-olds that are stepping up into the first team compared to senior pros at 32. Well, what those two need in terms of how you talk to them and what they need within sessions and how you might plan their work within sessions is totally different. And I think if I hadn't been exposed to that early in my career and what that looked like, I probably wouldn't be in the position I am now. So that's something quite meaningful for me that I picked up early in my time.
I think Frankie's like spot on there in terms of its characteristics. So I'm the same. I can't think of one single role model that has, you know, influenced me my whole career, if you like, or my whole life. It's more so you try and take bits from everybody, and it's those characteristics. I think for me, when I was really young, I just thought I wanted to be a PE teacher because I didn't know you could be a full-time female coach. And then when playing for Newcastle United Centre of Excellence, there was female coaches there. So me just seeing that made me realise that actually it is possible to have a career as a football coach. So that could be one example of a role model. But then as I've grown older, my role models are male role models. And there was bits where, you know, there might have been a person that I thought was God's gift and they were my role model. And I was like, I want to just be like them. But then the more I seen of them and the more I seen them on the inside, the more I found there's maybe bits that I don't particularly agree with or particularly like. So actually, I'm just going to take the good bits. And I think that's the key, is like, you need to be authentic and you need to be yourself. And the one thing I would say is that you take bits from other people that you like, take those characteristics, like what Frankie said, the attention to detail. That's something that she thinks is really important. And I think that's the key really, is you take bits from other people, but never lose yourself, and be authentic. And people are going to influence you and help you and inspire you. Of course they are, but you got to be authentic and put it in your own personality, really.
I think adding on to that, Nat, I think that's probably one of the key learning journeys for me as the people that have really allowed me to understand me and get to know me as a person and really understand what motivates me. Why am I in the game? What's my why? And how do I use that every day when I get up and I'm supporting coaches? And if I can understand me better, I can definitely understand other people better and the players that I work with or the coaches now that I work with. So those people that have, you almost don't see it at the time, but now you look back and you think, gosh, that person really allowed me to see more of me, and really allowed me to be me, but with some direction. And I think we could almost, you know, especially three of us today, speak about Brent and the opportunities he gave us and brought us all together. And, you know, for me as a coach, just being in a little village by myself and not really connecting with others, being brought down to London and spending days with female coaches, and the insight they gave us was incredible. But the individual time he spent, now looking back as a coach educator and not a coach anymore, he was incredible at getting us to understand ourselves and supporting our own journey and being authentic to us. So I think, you know, the advice that I could give anyone would be, get to know you, and be purposeful then in what you look for in others. So I can imagine if Frankie there was really meaningful around, I want to know more about getting a message across to players. And, you know, if she could go back in time and watch that coach again now, how much more purposeful she would be in extracting that information from that person. So yeah, I think that authentic thing and the thing about being me and understanding me is probably the biggest point from me.
I think just to jump in there, because, you know, everyone knows I'm going to probably say Brent is one of my biggest biggest influences in my career. When Nat was speaking about you know, the fact that you take, you know, good and bad, well, you know, you watch people, you learn from them and you pick all the good bits and move them on. Just a quote, you know, we've got to get one of his quotes in at least in this hour. Brent always says, I've never had an original thought in my life. And I think as a coach, you know, on your journey, you know, everything we talk about or do, you know, it's been done by someone else. And actually there's a real beauty in trying to learn as much as you can from the people that have been out there and done it already. And yeah, so Brent's been a massive influencer in my career, a massive advocate of developing females in the game, which I think is, you know, such an important thing to note as a male, you know, who's been passionate about working in the female game, that he took the time to really, you know, devote to trying to identify young female coaches and bring them through. But I think just to kind of go back to the question in terms of role models, The other one that really stands out for me is as a young coach starting out in centre of excellence football and playing at not a great level for Barnet Ladies. The head coach at Barnet Ladies, who was also the technical director at the centre of excellence I worked at, was also an assistant coach with Mo with the under-19s. So that role modelling piece of having that attainability of being able to work underneath someone and really learn from someone who is living it day by day is so important, because I think, you know, when you can see it, you can believe it. And that sounds like one of those, I'm going with all the corny statements now, aren't I? But I think it's so true. You know, Nat said she wanted to be a PE teacher. Well, I wanted to be a PE teacher because, you know, my PE teacher was the most pivotal person in my secondary school experience. And that was my role model. So, you know, that's what you see, that's what you think you're going to go after. So I think, you know, the more attainable we can make role models, female role models in particular, or advocates of females to develop in the game, I think that's key, because, you know, the one big standout moment for me is that coach sitting me down inside a dark changing room at Hillingdon FC. I was under 12s coach. I was desperate to be her in the future, you know, and I badgered her about it all the time. And I think my question was, you know, how can I be you in the future? And the one thing she said to me, and it was nothing really, probably to her, she's probably forgotten it, but the biggest thing she said was, you need to start your A license, you need to start it now, and you will be good enough. And it might seem scary, it might be male dominated, but actually when you get on that course, you know, you'll be fine. And having that person give you that confidence to take that step is key, because without her, there's no way I would have even considered putting an application in back at that age. So I think those connections, those role models, those key people, you know, they have a massive impact on your direction, and finding out who that person is for you and making sure it's someone who can be honest and open about, you know, what's right for you. And sometimes that honesty means it'll be things that you need to hear that you might not want to, is really important.
I think, you know, Ryan Groom and I wrote an article, a book chapter about role models and mentoring. And some of the points that come up there was about the powerful learning that can happen in situ. And when you're looking at your role models in practice, it's very rare one person has got all the attributes that you can, you know, you take and accept. And it's about looking at the actions of others, the rules of behavior and the guidelines, and trying to work out through a process of self-actualization what's going to work for me in my context. And I love the fact that when you're talking about confidence, it made me more confident. The book kind of chapter said that, you know, the case study in there was talking about, it gave me the confidence to realize I was heading in the right direction. And I think that's really important, because if we're confident, we're more likely to access other opportunities. So yeah, thank you very much for sharing that. What we'll do is now for people who are still on the chat, we will open up for question and answers. So if you've got a question that you would like to ask our panelists, then please put it in the chat, or send it to Paul or send it to myself. I will either read it out loud so we can answer them, or I will ask you to turn your camera on and you can ask directly. So if you've got a question, send it in or put it on the group chat, and I'll read them out, and we'll do that for the next, you know, 10 to 15 minutes if anyone would like to ask a question.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, gonna do some music. I mean, not that this has come through as a direct question, but somebody did put on the chat, if I could find the comment. It was about how do you know, females start to balance family and that kind of thing. And for me, I was thinking, do you know, my job at work, you know, certainly at the uni, there's creche availability. So perhaps that might be one way forward, that organisations could think about supporting either single male parents or females with kids in organisations. That was one thing that certainly came to my mind. But do we have any questions from anyone on the chat that wants to send them through to me or Paul? Paul, has anyone sent you a question?
No, Rebecca. They're just, I think they might just looking through the chat now.
Asa, do you have a question?
Hello, everyone. This is Aish. I'm from I'm from Australia. So here in the coach education system, we've got like a process where often after you've completed the attendance requirement on a course, like you have to complete an assessment in order to achieve your certificate. So just I know that the completion rate for those assessments are quite low here. I just want to understand a little bit more about your experiences of that, and also is that like a barrier to women progressing within the coach education pathway over there?
Who would like to take that one?
Do you want me to take the coach anyone? I think we've made huge strides here, especially within the FA, around how assessments look, if you like, and it's almost recording and reflecting on the journey of the coach from start of the qualification to the end. So we now don't have official assessment days or assessment sessions or anything that's almost a formative and summative assessment. It's almost an ongoing reflection piece between yourself as a coach educator and the coach, and it's a constant learning journey that is recorded. Coaches have individual development plans, and that coach almost goes on a journey with you until you get to the point where you can be deemed as competent. There is no cap in terms of how many times you need to be seen, how much contact time you can have, how much interaction. It's almost individualized to every single coach. So I think in our instance that now, you know, probably going back to myself, Sav, Lids, when you did your A license, it was a group of players on a 3G, SGP or wherever you booked, had no idea who the players were. You turned up and you delivered your session, whereas now it's so much in tune to your environment, the players that you have, the club context in which you work, the environment that wraps around you, and it almost allows you to thrive within that. So again, going back to my comment around, we're trying to catch people in here, we're not kind of trying to catch people out, and we're trying to support them as best they can in their environment that they work with their players. So I think the way that things have moved, that it's almost allowed, especially women and females within the game, to feel more comfortable coaching their own players and being in their own environment rather than having to step out of that and coach a different group of males on the 3G or whatever that might be. So I think we've made huge strides with that within the FA. I don't know if that answers the question or if anyone can think of anything else.
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump in there because it was one of the things we were going to talk about. You know, one of the biggest learning experiences for me was failing my A license the first time round. I was part of, like what Kelsey said, the previous A license where you kind of did 2 blocks over 2 years, and then whenever you felt ready, you could think about an assessment. And I, you know, worked across 12 months after my block 2, and I felt like I was ready. The mentors I was working with encouraged me to go to my assessment, but I think the issue back then was it was, you know, on the day, you have a bad day, it's not supportive in terms of, you know, where you are as a coach. It's just a on that moment situation. And mine was similar to what Kelsey said. I went in and worked with a boys' academy that I'd never coached previously, on a 3G in the middle of nowhere that I'd never been to before, with a tutor that assessed me that I also had no experience of working with, and I failed. But the one thing I would say is it was the best experience of my life. And if you'd have asked me that on the actual day, that would not have been the answer you got. It was a day before my 26th birthday and I was devastated. But actually it's a positive story for me in the end, because the guy that assessed me was Jim Hicks, who works for the PFA. I'm sure he'd be happy for me to say that. And I did my pro license last year, and Jim Hicks was my tutor through the pro license. So in terms of like a full circle round, he's been someone who's been really pivotal in my progression as a coach since. But actually, in terms of like key role models, like we spoke about before, that failing that course took me, you know, probably 6 to 8 months to get over. And one of my biggest learning moments was actually getting up the confidence to reach out to some of the A licensed tutors in my area, Jeff Pike being one of them. And I sat down with Jeff and talk about level of care. You know, this is the best example I can give it. It wasn't Jeff's role to come and support me or meet me on an evening, but he met me and he saw where I was at, and he understood how I was feeling, and he drew me this graph, and he kind of went, you know, that's your level 1, that's your level 2, that's your level 3. It's all been going up, and actually, you know, failing your A license 6 months ago hasn't defined you as a coach. It's not changed your ability. And what's important now is that you pick yourself up and you go again. And, you know, to quote another one of Brent Hill's sayings, it's not how hard you fall, it's how quick you get back up. And I actually rang Brent the day I failed, and that's probably what he said to me on the phone. And again, it probably didn't sink at the time, but I learned more in the 12 months after I failed my A license than I've learned in the last 10 years. I learned more about myself. I learned, you know, what I needed to do. And actually I reached out and got some great support from the tutors, and it looked a little bit more like what Kelsey is speaking about in terms of what the current program is. Those two people, Jim and Jeff, worked with me for 6 months. They supported me. They made sure I felt ready. They took me through my final assessment, and it was a really supportive kind of end outcome. So I think the positive change in coach education now is that you're never on that on the day kind of moment again. And actually it can be really specific to you as a learner and supportive to you.
Yeah, I think adding on to that as well, Liz, that although it's quite new in terms of the assessment, that level of care and people really wanting you to do well has always been there. Like, I always remember, you know, this job coming up for me, and I wanted to be what I'd seen, very similar to what Liz has said, and be that supportive network for somebody. And going throughout my whole journey, Julie Chipchase delivered my level 1 when I was 16. And was there the day, and I have no idea still now how she was even there, but she was there on the day that I did my A licence, walked across the 3G, just gave me a nod and a wink and walked off. And from that moment, the whole bit of everything just sank from me, that I had all this fear inside, and it just sank, just seeing her and seeing her there. And she'd been on my level 1, level 2, delivered my B licence, assessed my B licence, there on the day of my A licence, and still continuing to be around as a role model for me to connect with. And exactly the same as Gordon Staniforth, he was the main reason I applied for this job. He pushed me and said, "Kels, you ready? Just go and do it, you'll be brilliant," and pushed me. And I rang him at every interview step. I talked to him through every interview question, and he was just there on the end of the phone. And I think having somebody, whether that is a formal coach educator or whether that's just a friend or a colleague within the game, I think having just that person is just really, really valuable.
I think that leads us nicely into another question we've had come in. It's about, do you guys think we are self-limiting at times in our belief that perhaps we can get roles or perform well in context of coaching? And something about maybe the link to boards. Julie, if I ask that as in terms of self-limiting, and then if you just put in there what you mean just about boards in the chat, I'll ask that when we get going. Who wants to take that one?
I'll take it.
Oh yes, Frankie, go for it.
No, I do. A very short answer. I think that anybody that thinks that self-limiting is an issue, I think it's probably more of a issues, maybe a strong word, but I think that's maybe more within them. I think you alluded to it earlier, actually, Sav, about when you had all these things in your head about what it was going to be like going into the boys' academy, and then you went there and it was totally different. Yeah. From my experiences working within the men's game, I think I've never had an experience or a time where I've thought I've been looked at or judged any differently because I'm a female. I think once you start working and you deliver, who you are or what you are has no influence or no effect on the session. It's are you ready to deliver in that environment? And I think that's it. Like, if you're there and you deliver a session and you're meant to be there, it doesn't matter. There's no barriers for me. I've never had in this environment, I've never thought that I'd been looked at any differently because I'm a female. I think if you're there and you deliver, the players respect you, the coaches respect you, the team around the team respect you. And I think that a lot of the times we do maybe concoct these things that it's going to be like, and then you get there and you think, actually, this is just a normal environment. It's just people. We're just working with people here. And I think that that's resonated throughout this, that it's people, the role models we've all alluded to there, male role models, female role models, like there's no difference. It just depends on the people. But I think a lot of it is we invent situations in our head that are actually not there.
Based on that research there, Sam, I think what Julie was alluding to, that the FA have done more and more, especially over this last season, to invest in research and unpick the game, whether that's from a player's voice perspective or from a female coach perspective. And I know some things came back from the Leeds Beckett research around how women do almost hold themselves back from specific roles. And we know that, you know, if there was a job description and a male maybe ticked 3 out of the 6, he would definitely apply. Whereas, you know, a female might have 6 out of 6 and still question whether they should or not. And I think that's just the nature of us, and probably the overthinking and overcomplicating part of it. And that's where sometimes we do need, as females within the game, we do need that somebody that will just reassure us, we speak to, we talk it through with, and they almost rationalise our thoughts. And that's what I needed when I applied, and Gordon really helped me to rationalise my thoughts. And I think we're starting to understand that more of a governing body, and starting to think how we can help support that within our coach education, but also help support clubs with their recruitment strategies and things like that, that will help more women and more females apply for roles and feel more comfortable when doing so.
I think for me, I was going to say the same thing as Kelsey in terms of like the stat of like, I think us women do like to complicate things, and I think men do too, but there is, you know, there's the research there to say that men will apply for a job if they're 60% think they tick the box, and women won't, even if they're 100%. So that was one of the things I was going to say. But then I was going to say, I do think, which we've touched upon, just the importance of having that support network and those people that could particularly take a risk with you. So I know Lydia speaks a lot around Brent, and Brent kind of fought for more female coaches. And certainly from my perspective at Newcastle United, I always see my academy manager, Joe Joyce, as somebody who, you know, really took a gamble and brought first female in full time. I can imagine was quite a big thing for him in a male dominant environment. And, you know, there's other people out there that might not have done that. They might not take that gamble, and they might not take that risk because of what people might think. So for me, like, he was a massive role model for me and has supported me in my whole 6 years of being full time at the academy. But I think that kind of highlights the importance of these people in this support network that we've all got. There's people behind the scenes that have helped us get to where we are and will continue to help us. And I think that's a really key thing.
I think just to echo what Frankie was talking about as well, I don't have anywhere near as much experience as Frankie in that of working with boys. But when I first moved to St Neots, I did a small stint with the under-21s boys at the club, just alongside my FA job. And I had some real reservations in my head. You know, we're all human. We worry about, you know, how we might be perceived or taken. But again, like, nothing was any different to any other session. And actually, you know, there were times that year where I couldn't be there for a game day or training session because I had FA commitments. I got more stick from the boys when I wasn't there. Because ultimately, I think it comes back to that credibility. And if you're giving good information to players and you're setting up sessions that are enjoyable, they're going to see the outcomes and they're going to want to be part of it. So I think your gender disappears when your mouth opens to some extent. And that's what I hope for the future of coach development. We are coaches, we're all working in football. And I really found that through the pro license too, you know, being around the boys on the course, being one of only 2 females, although the other female was working in the male game. You know, again, the moment you start engaging in those conversations, the conversation is football. And, you know, whether I'm referring to examples from the women's game or the men's game, we're talking the same language. And I think that level of credibility comes when you can actually hold your own in that type of environment. And, you know, people understand that what you're saying makes sense.
I think for me, if I'm thinking about a player, they're looking at me and they're trying to work out, do you care about me? And how are you going to help me? How are you going to help me to get to where I want to go, whether that's the Premier League or the Super League? And my experiences in the RTC and the boys have been very similar. There's some subtle differences, yes, but very similar. And I think if a female is listening to this and they want to work in the boys' environment, why don't you just try and get in and observe or do an internship before you kind of commit fully to something? I think clubs would be fairly open to that. I know this season, as an example, one of my students wanted to come in at Watford, and I asked the question, and they were able to come in and observe just to see if they like the environment. So I think if you put yourselves out there enough, opportunities will come from that.
I think, Sav, it wouldn't be, if I didn't get a second quote in, it wouldn't be right, would it? So again, another one of Brent's specials, people don't care what you know until they know that you care. So I think your point there is really valid. You know, the players want to know that the person on the pitch is really buying into them and is there to develop them. So I think, you know, male or female is irrelevant. It's actually, you know, are you going to put the time in to help develop them?
If you think about now, sorry Sam, I was literally just going to add on to it. If you think about now the workforce that's available across the game, that you can tap into, whether that is, you know, the women's game coach development team around one of our CDOs or the women's national coach developers, or whether that's your CCD or a mentor. There's so many people out there now in terms of a workforce that you can connect with, that, you know, almost everybody should be making some effort to connect with somebody and have somebody there that they can almost utilize as someone to support them throughout all these decisions that they're making. And the more people you can get, the more difference of opinions and different cognitive thoughts you can get from a vast amount of people with different experiences and different thoughts that can help maybe clarify some of your own thoughts and get rid of some worries, I think, as well. So, you know, there's so many people now to connect with, that the game's just grown considerably, that everybody should be looking for somebody, I think.
And I think you've just got to be brave to take those opportunities. So while we're on it, Nat, I'd love to come and observe you work in the Boys Academy at some point. So if we could fix that up, that would be great.
Can you send me that Brent book you've got first? And then...
I'm actually not publishing it until next year. You have to wait.
Okay, girls, just before I wrap up, I wondered if there was anything perhaps you wanted to say that we've not covered, or anything else just before I summarise it. If not, I'll go to a summary.
Go for it.
Yeah, okay. Well, look, firstly, thank you very much for your time and your honesty. I've seen on the chat there's been some really nice responses straight away. So look, thank you very much for your time. Also, I wanted to just say, you know, thanks to the Football Collective for supporting this concept, and the support that I've had, you know, from Paul, Alex and Dan has been brilliant. So just in summary, really, I wanted to leave everybody with these final thoughts. For me personally, I think research, policy and practice need to work more collaboratively in the future. I think we've spoken about the nature of learning and evolution is often uncomfortable, but it's needed to bring about, you know, that change. If you're going on your coaching journey, you're going to need to be resilient. There might be some challenges that you might need to kind of bounce back from. You're going to need that drive, and you're certainly going to need that self-belief and confidence. It's really important to be yourself and have that authenticity, and ask yourself, you know, what sets you apart if you're going for a job role. The journey is going to require sacrifice, and you might often find yourselves at crossroads, and you at times might need to take a gamble on an opportunity. Can we identify good practice examples that clubs and organisations can replicate in order to support and value female coaches? Can we strive for our organisation to have gender equity? Female coaches, can we do more to support each other, whether that's communities of practice or developmental networks? Can we identify deliberate allies in the game, whether they're male or female, who can support us on our journey? If we are going to challenge the status quo at the moment, which is the underrepresentation of women in coaching, can men and women work together to kind of tackle that problem? Women in the coaching workforce, I'm hoping that, you know, today this is, you know, shown that you're not alone. We've all certainly had interesting journeys with lots of highs and lows, and we need to have these kinds of conversations and be better at supporting each other. You know, if anybody does see or witness any, you know, sexism or gender bias, then please call it out unapologetically. You know, there's no place for it in the game at all. And I'm going to finish with a quote from Nicole Lavoie, which was published in 2019. And she suggested that everybody can do something to support and grow the game. So I guess I'll finish with a question for all of you who are listening to this. What is it you can do, and what will you do to help us tackle the underrepresentation of women in the coaching workforce. Thank you very much for listening and tuning in, and I hope you've enjoyed it. Paul, was there anything you wanted to finish up with?
No, I think you did a masterful summary there, Rebecca. That was great. That was a brilliant session. Well done. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
the recording will go up on the website and on our YouTube channel, so there'll be access to people, and it'd be a great resource as well for students out there, which is a great legacy for it as well. So I just want to thank you all, and Rebecca, you've done a brilliant job getting all this together. Thank you very much. We had like 58 participants there at one point, which is it's unbelievable, really. So thank you, and it was good to hear another Middlesbrough voice there. So yeah, cheers, Rebecca. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Thanks.